All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Conahan, ACRL's Manager of Professional Development. Thank you for joining us today for another webinar offered as part of our COVID-19 and Academic Librarianship webcast series. I feel like every time that we're doing these, my dogs know it's 1 o'clock and we're starting a webinar and they start barking. So I'm sorry if you hear them in the background. The joys of working from home. Our goal for these webinars is to bring our colleagues together to discuss ways to best meet the needs of the library community during this uncertain time. We have some additional webinars planned for the coming week, so please check the website for those details, and also feel free to use the chat box to share other topics that are percolating so we can respond with new webinars or resources. As Lois mentioned, today's session is being recorded. We'll email out the link shortly after the webcast, and we'll also post the recording online and on the ACRL YouTube channel. Today's webcast is Managing Remote Workers. I would like to thank our presenters, Martin House and Cinthya Ippoliti, for being with us today. Dr. Martin House currently serves as Assistant Director for Public Services at Central Piedmont Community College and joined the college in 2010. Prior to his work at the community college, Martin worked in a variety of roles at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Public Library, where he held a management role for several years. Cinthya Ippoliti is the University Librarian and Director of the Auraria Library, which serves 3 institutions of higher education in Denver. She provides administrative leadership for library services, spaces, partnerships, and programming. Thanks again, Martin and Cinthya, for being here today, and please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Sorry, I was having technical difficulties. This is Martin. I apologize. So this is Martin House. I am with Central Piedmont. I guess I'm going first. So when I was asked to do this, I started thinking about, what are we doing at Central Piedmont that I thought would help the other folks out there in the library world. We are a community college. We're one of the largest ones in North Carolina. And so our resources, the resources at our disposal might be a little different than, of course, what you have, but I hope that this presentation helps you and that we, at the end, will have some time to ask some questions and get some more clarity on things that maybe I didn't go over as well as I should. So to begin with, I want to just kind of go over what we first noticed. We realized right away that communication was going to be critical. And how do you communicate when also no one's at work anymore? We had tons and tons of requests for equipment checkout. We realized, oh gosh, chat, we need to increase how we staff that. And speaking of that, how do we staff chat? Then we realized, what about our phones? Every campus, we have 7 libraries at 6 campuses. Everyone has a unique phone number. How are these phones getting answered? And then we began leveraging our SpringShare products to organize us a little better and started thinking of projects for staff to do and then trying to think, how do we, once we get over the critical mass of the first few days, how do we supervise our staff and keep the momentum going? And that is what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, remote communication. We started like everybody, email, text messages, phone. We called each other as much as possible, on the admin team at least, and then started sending lots of emails. Well, the college has this great product that's fairly new to us called WebEx Teams. And along with scheduling actual video or audio meetings, WebEx Teams allows you to do a lot more. So this is kind of what it looks like. It is a perpetual chat system where you can talk to each other, maybe as an individual, as a group. You see I have our library staff, I have telephone reference, I have directors, a couple of other teams are on there. And so we are able to communicate with each other on a regular basis. I have to be honest, WebEx Teams can get very overwhelming if the notifications aren't turned off. The first week or so, I was getting nonstop notifications, even on Sunday nights, and 5 o'clock in the morning, people were messaging each other back and forth, and I was getting all the notices, and that started becoming very stressful because I felt like I never had a moment to myself. So I turned the notifications off, which has really helped with managing this product for us. But it's been really great to just keep in touch with everybody. You can do impromptu voice or video meetings. We have an all library staff meeting that we can also do through here. And we do our weekly check-ins, which helps a lot, just keeping touch. Even if the meeting is just about shooting the breeze and talking about how our lives are going, it's something to keep us going. So one of the big things we had to deal with was equipment checkout. Students, faculty were all clamoring for equipment. We had about 120 or so laptops. Well, I guess we had about 100 laptops in total. The college gave us more as time went on. So we checked out about 140 of our own laptops. I say laptops, about half of those are Chromebooks. Then the college went ahead and purchased or leased about 200 more Chromebooks, 100 plus hotspots, and even made really high-end desktops available to our staff. We didn't actually check all this equipment out. The Chromebooks, hotspots, and desktops were checked out through IT and through our student life staff, but we are part of the solution in terms of inventory control, and all this is going into our systems, whether it's Sierra or whether it's LibCal. LibCal we use for staff equipment. Our ILS we're using for student equipment. Sorry, am I missing an important chat? I guess not. And so we're just part of that process to get these items back. We also had some cameras and headsets that were able to scrounge at the last minute because not all the Chromebooks had built-in video cameras and so forth. So we really did our best to help folks with this. Now you may be asking yourself, why in the heck are they checking out Chromebooks, especially if people need access to Office and Outlook? But one thing the college has been working on for a long time is this remote.cpcc.edu, which is a virtual desktop environment. I can log in directly to my desktop at work. You see it says AT326 and all that gibberish right there. That's my personal desktop. Then I have access to a few other desktops there as well. So that's how we're able to keep our technology going or keep access to our technology. But of course, I use my personal laptop at home more than anything now. Our chat service was the next thing that we realized was going to have to be beefed up. We use also SpringShare Product LibAnswers for this. We increased the number of days and hours. We realized that the limited amount of hours we were staffing, we were basically staffing it from like 10 to 5, 10 to 6 or so, depending on how busy we thought it might be before the pandemic. But now we're staffing it, I believe, 8 to 8 Monday through Friday. We also have some Saturday and Sunday hours that staff are volunteered to take. We try to balance this with what we think the traffic is going to be, and also what staff we have and what we think their capabilities are. Not all staff are very maybe adept at chat, so we're trying to use those staff in a different way, but focus on the folks that will do the best job for us in terms of doing online interactions with students. We check our statistics pretty regularly. I looked today, and in the first week, we already had almost as many chats as we had for the whole month last month. So that makes sense, right? Since people aren't coming to us in person, so chat is really going strong for us. We also encourage students to who need more in-depth help to schedule one-on-one sessions with a librarian. We can do that through WebEx Teams, or we can do it through just scheduling a meeting through WebEx. So we're trying to offer similar services to what we have been doing, just doing it virtually as much as possible to support our students and get them through these hard times, because from everything we hear, our students are having a hard time coping with classes and moving on to online, as you all know, completion rates for online education are not as high as in person. We realized about a week in that, oh gosh, who's checking our phones? We were checking voicemail at Central, a library for sure, but the other libraries aren't necessarily as busy with the phones, but we realized that we needed to come up with a solution. It took our ITS department about another week to enable this Cisco Jabber client so we could answer phones at home. So we have 5 employees, part-timers. We're trying to give these part-timers as much as many working hours as possible. So we're staffing it from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 1 on Saturday right now. And the numbers aren't huge, but we are definitely helping students and staff, faculty trying to navigate the issues right now with not being able to come on campus. We scheduled everything through LibAnswers, and we're communicating through Web Teams. I don't know if you recall on the slides previously, there was a telephone reference team, and we communicate with each other, whether a simple thing is saying, I'm signing on, I'm signing off, which really helps us to know who's on the phone. But all the campus managers also are part of that team, so they're able to assist their employees who are answering the phones if there is a complicated reference question or something like that. We also check and return voicemails 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. We have people assigned to do that to make sure we don't miss anybody. The SpringShare products we're using, we've invested quite heavily, and I think it's shown to have been a good move, especially in this situation. We have, of course, we started with LibGuides. We use LibStaffer for creating the chat schedule, staffing schedule, the telephone reference schedule. LibAnswers, of course, is what we use for chat and also for collecting information after hours. So if the chat's not being staffed, a person can send an email. We will check the email as much as possible. During the operating hours, we check it constantly, and we do respond to folks to the emails that they send. LibGuides, of course, we use to try to organize the just fire hose of information that's been coming to us. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And LibCal we're using primarily now for inventory control of faculty equipment. So the FAQs and LibGuides, what we've done is really work on the existing intranet we built. Here on the right-hand side, you see it says staff intranet today. That's been in place for a year or more now, and we're using it as kind of the central hub for all things that staff need to know. The FAQs are searchable. We are constantly updating FAQs and putting more information in there that is important to assisting our patrons. On the left-hand side, you'll see telephone reference. I created that specifically for folks on TelRef to give them instructions on how to track statistics and enter each phone call into the system, but also the important links on the right-hand side are where folks can have quick access to frequently asked questions, but in this specific instance about the COVID-19 issues at the college. We also created a projects for home list where we're starting to put together all the projects that we can think of to keep people busy at home. We have a lot of part-time folks that we're worried about having enough work because we do want them to get paid. A lot of them rely on this money, and we don't want them to all of a sudden not have work to do. So we're working on, we have this list up where there's a contact for help person. Many times it's me or one of the other managers. And then we list which people are working on the project so we don't duplicate effort, but that we're being as streamlined and as effective as possible. So a lot of the things that we're doing that I've talked to you so far deal with the technology that we have and the software that we have in place. And I realize not everyone has this, but one thing that we have learned is that daily tracking of what we do is important for us. So I track in the Word doc very broadly what I work on. So today I would have indicated that a couple of meetings. I'm doing this webinar right now, just to broadly track to keep myself honest. And if there's ever a question of, well, what did Martin do during the pandemic? My supervisor and her supervisors will know what I've been working on. But we also do regular check-ins. So I copy and pasted an example of my outlook for this week. And you notice there's several WebEx meetings and directors meetings and things on here. These are recurring meetings that we do every week to check in with each other. On Wednesdays at 3 p.m., you notice we have an all staff check-in. So we have about 45 staff or so that are online at any given time at the same time. And we just check in with each other, see what we need, kind of see how people are doing. And our dean and director have been very nice. We received an email Friday of last week to let us know that if we need to take some time, some mental time, just to take it, not to even worry too much about, tracking official sick time, but if you need an hour here and there to kind of take care of your mental health, to do that, because otherwise you're just not going to be productive. And that's it for me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give it back over to the webcast, and thank you for listening.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and hopefully you can all hear me okay. This is Cynthia, and I want to thank ACRL for the opportunity to let us share kind of what we're learning during these difficult times. And I also want to thank Martin for his insight as well. I think we can definitely all learn from each other during this time. And so I think actually our presentations are going to go very well together, because I'm going to touch a little bit on some additionally kind of perhaps different aspects Martin also talked about. I'll talk a little bit about kind of our logistical details as well. And I'm just wanting to make sure, I see some chat. I just want to make sure that folks can hear me okay. Great. So just to give you a little bit of background and context of how everything happened here for us at the Auraria Library. So as Margot mentioned in my introduction, we are a unique campus and a unique library. We are on a tri-institutional campus that serves the University of Colorado, Denver, Metropolitan State University of Denver, and Community College of Denver. So Martin, you're definitely good company here. And kind of everything leading up to the time and the day that we started working remotely, which, as I've indicated, was March 18th, which feels like a lifetime ago now, things evolved very, very quickly. One of the challenges that our library faced is all the decisions had to be made kind of in concert by the three institutions together, as they typically are for other kind of broad level decisions. And so things started to move very, very quickly. I would say probably around March 11th, March 12th, when we started to realize, of course, that the national and the international situation was becoming critical. And there were a lot of meetings, there was a lot of discussion about what's the role of the library, are we going to stay open, are we not? And I also just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of libraries that were not able to close as quickly as we did, and some that are probably still open. And so I just want to be mindful of that. And I just want to kind of reiterate that I feel very fortunate to have been able to advocate for us to close as quickly as we did, that leadership took that opinion into account, and that we were all kind of on the same page, what I would say, relatively quickly. So for that, I am very, very grateful that we were able to make those decisions. And so in the time kind of leading up to that March 18th date, there was a lot of scrambling. As Martin mentioned, we also ran out of all the laptops, all the hotspots that we had checked out. We were trying to make sure that students had everything that they needed as much as possible before we let everyone know that the building was going to be physically closed down. We also made some policy decisions regarding, forgiving sort of late fees and fines and non-returned items. We basically closed off our book drops, so that we said whatever items you have, you can keep them. We changed our equipment checkout policies pretty quickly and said you can keep them for as long as you need them. We put phone messages on our voicemails so that folks who would still be calling in would at least know that we were not physically in the building. And we kind of went to remote, I would say probably very, very quickly. So all of this sort of happened in probably about a 3 to 5 day span. So that's just a little bit of context and background for you. And so a couple of different things that I would say are really applicable here is this idea of starting with people. I think, I've done a lot of thinking personally, professionally about how this situation has affected all of us. And it's affected us so very deeply in so many different ways. And I keep coming back to what is sort of my number one priority as a director, as a leader, and it's starting with the people and making sure that the people feel like they're taken care of and they're supported. And so how do we do that? I think it definitely has to start with self-care. Martin mentioned that there was moments when he felt he couldn't turn off, email and pings and all of that. And I think it's important for you yourself personally, regardless of what role you fill in your library, to be rested and to be well so that you can help support others. And I've tried to do that myself, some days better than others, but definitely being mindful of that. You also will not have all the information you need to make decisions. And again, this is not even about being at the administrative level. It's about in any role that you are in, you will not have everything that you need. And so you just have to do the best that you can. And you have to be okay with that. And some days are more productive than others, and that's also okay. So I think kind of in this theme of self-care, just give yourself the permission to have these emotions, to have these issues and be grappling with them while you're still trying to get whatever you can done. And with that, we made a very conscious decision in my library with our administrative team to not track productivity or time tracking other than at some fairly broad levels. We understand that everyone is juggling a lot and you don't know what each person's situation is, whether they have family members they're caring for, friends, neighbors, their own well-being. So you just don't know, and you don't exactly have a full picture of to the extent that that's the case. And so being mindful of that. All of our supervisors are communicating with their folks that flexibility and empathy are the most important things during this time, that things are not sort of business as usual, that we are doing the best that we can in a very difficult situation for everyone. And we also understand that due to the nature of some folks' job duties, some people are working differently and in some instances perhaps more than others. And unfortunately, that is not as equitable as perhaps it could be. And the example I'll use here is, for example, folks staffing chat, and I'll talk about that as well. They have to be online and available at certain times of the day when other people might not. But we understood that's just the nature of what it is. And we're trying to sort of account for those inequities as best as we can. And not everyone did have access to Wi-Fi computers, so we had to adjust workloads and expectations, and we did order peripherals and materials and software as needed on an ongoing basis. And that was, again, the commitment that we made for ourselves and to our employees, that we will try to do everything we can to help support you so that you are as successful as possible in this environment. And another piece to this is staying connected. So we're trying to do regular meetings and regular check-ins, trying to have some fun. Everyone is experimenting on fun Zoom backgrounds and talking about, having a virtual get-together. We're having one next week, in fact, to just talk about anything except work. We've had family members say hi on calls, pets making appearances. So we've tried to emphasize that connection as much as we possibly can. And again, kind of always being mindful of the human element involved in all of this. The next piece of all of this is, and of course Martin talked quite a bit about this too, is communication. So our main tools our email, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, of course, and chat for our research assistance support. And again, we also wanted to make sure that everyone had what they needed, that they could log in. Our IT folks have been amazing. Everything from getting people set up with their laptops, learning how to access remote desktops, making sure everybody has the passwords they need, kind of all the logistical piece of that. But those are kind of the main tools that we're working with. And of course, in Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Outlook and email and sort of a Word and, you know, the basics there. So the methods, so externally, we had created a link on our library website, which we've been able to update on a regular basis so that anyone who logs in can see that information and they know how to access research support, how to email us, how to chat with us, how to put in any questions. And we've been able to just have that one place where we know we can just update it in one place, and that link appears on the university's web pages and all of that good stuff. So we only have to have one place where we update everything, and we don't have to worry about where else it might be linked from. And our communications coordinator has kept in touch with the communications folks from the 3 institutions, and he's been very active on Twitter, and I think probably a little bit on Facebook as well. And that's come in really, really handy to be able to kind of know what's going on with the other institutions, be able to tweet out our own information, and at least provide some ongoing and continued help and support for students and folks who might be on Twitter and in some of those spaces as well, and not just through our website. And internally, email has been the primary method of communicating within the library, as well as a ton of different meetings. And I'll talk about that during the next slide as well. And timing. So some weeks there was a lot going on, a lot of logistical details, others not as much. And again, that has to do, I think, with the ebb and flow of your work, of what's going on within your institution. I think it's very situational. And again, that's okay. Not every week is going to look exactly the same. Probably not every day is going to look exactly the same. And that's fine. And you just have to sort of adjust as you're going along. And I tried, from my own perspective, to provide updates as soon as I received them, because I sensed a lot. There is still a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't all have all the information that we need. There's a lot going on the national, international levels as well, state levels as well. And I struggled when I would receive a piece of information, but not everything, and still waiting for the rest. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So how did we organize our work? So the individual, at the sort of the individual level, it's really between each person and that person's supervisor, and really finding that rhythm that works for that person, again, given whatever circumstances they're dealing with the type of work that they do, with their workload. So really trying to make it as personalized and as individualized as possible. We noticed that typically people would say, yeah, there's a lot of activity kind of earlier in the day, more folks are sort of online and kind of connected, but by the end of the day, people are more tired because we are in front of the computer, probably much more so than usual for some folks, maybe not everyone. And it just felt like there's kind of more happening in the morning. That's very anecdotal, so I don't know if your own experience kind of matches that or not. So for the departments, each department completed like a remote working outline or document. So we have a general idea of the projects and the initiatives that are happening within each department. We are tracking things like the number of chats, of email questions, which we would anyway. And we do have our students, I think this is a good time for me to mention, we do have our student workers providing that support as well. We have double-staffed chat as well. We've seen an uptick in those interactions as well. We've conducted online instruction. So there's a lot of activity kind of in that area. And I will also say that the library's commitment and the institutional commitment is that even for folks whose work does not easily lend themselves to working remotely, everyone continues to be compensated. And that was a huge piece for me personally to make sure that that would happen. And also, I think it's also a testament to our institutional commitment to making that happen. So, and I'll talk a little bit about how some of that is working as well. We have weekly meetings with our department heads and the associate directors. And then I also have weekly meetings with my direct reports. So ironically, especially with the department heads, we normally did not meet weekly when we were in our regular kind of work environment, but that's increased. And actually, I think that's worked out really, really nicely. I feel like we are more connected and we are able to just touch base about what's going on. And at the forefront of every meeting, we just do a check-in and ask how are folks doing? Because again, that to us is the most important piece of all of this, making sure that people are doing well, that they are able to focus on their well-being first and foremost, and that of their families and loved ones, and then kind of worrying about sort of everything else. And library-wide, so this is very interesting. We're conducting job searches, we're conducting library-wide meetings, and we're conducting, believe it or not, strategic planning. So a little bit about each one of those areas. So with our searches, actually I should say one, right now it's one that was already in progress before everyone went to working remotely. And what we did in that instance is we did say, no, this is an important position we want to fill. We already have the candidates, you know, who were coming up for their second round interviews. We didn't want to stop the momentum for that particular job search. So what we did is we sent every candidate a packet with first and foremost, a statement saying that we understand these are unusual circumstances, and if there's interruptions or technical issues, we fully understand that that might happen, and that's okay. So again, making sure that the candidates themselves felt welcome and supported during this time as well, understanding that it's probably a much more, even more stressful than a typical interview situation might be. We also provided all of the information and all of the questions for their day in that packet. And we also provided links to virtual tours and videos of campus and the library. So that was kind of the packet that we sent out to all the candidates, and we try to make it as equitably as possible. We use the same platform for everyone. We gave everyone the same instructions, and we did check-ins with them, and I'm happy to report that there were very minimal issues in that regard. And I think the candidates felt, again, they felt supported, and they felt like hopefully they were being set up for success in this environment. Library-wide meetings, it's just a big Zoom meeting kind of like this one. We built in some time to, again, share how everyone is doing and what maybe some more lighthearted or fun things they were thinking about or working on, and just making sure that we kept that connection and that we had that collegiality going in that environment as well. And strategic planning. So this is an interesting one. So instead of having kind of all library discussions and sort of having synchronous discussions about the elements of our strategic planning process, we decided to kind of break that up. So the admin team is doing some work, and then each of the departments is taking the questions and some of the activities that we would have done in an all staff or all group meeting, and doing that individually within their own departmental meetings and planning. So we're kind of coming up on starting to synthesize some of that information. So I'll keep everyone posted on how that's going. But so far, so good. So we're having the admin team meetings to kind of discuss our ideas and our topics and our content. And then we're sharing that out with the rest of the departments. And then they're going to bring back that information in Microsoft Teams. And then we'll continue to synthesize that. So we're doing it a little bit more, I guess, dispersed, if you would. It's not quite as perhaps as contained as if everyone was in the same room at the same time, but we'll see how that works. But we are, again, committed to keeping the momentum going, because we realized that some things we wanted to make sure that we continue doing. So what are some of the lessons learned from all of this thus far? And I'll come back to kind of that psychological, emotional. You have to be kind to yourself and to others, because things are not going as planned in some instances. Maybe in some instances are going better than planned, but just, again, having that empathy and that flexibility, I think, is really key during this time. And as a leader, again, I try to really emphasize for our folks that My main concern was their well-being, and that I want to make sure that they felt supported, so they didn't have to worry about the logistical details about how do I track time or how do I do this, because the answer is already there for them. And it's okay to show vulnerability and to say that you don't know and you're trying to get the answers, which I've done time and time again. And I have said, I'm sorry, I don't have all that information, or, you know, I don't know the answer right now, but I'll check on that and get back to you. And honesty is best, even if the information is not positive or you don't have all of the information. I know one of the things, and I'll talk about this in the next set of bullet points, you know, budget situations are not super positive right now. And I'm trying to be as upfront and as transparent with our group to just let them know kind of what I know and what's going on and what I'm hearing to help us kind of plan for what's ahead, even if we don't know exactly what's going to be up ahead. So the logistical piece was, for me and for us, communicating with the other institutions. So we technically, you'll see my email address is a CU Denver email address. We report up through CU Denver, but we are a tri-institutional library. So making sure that Metropolitan State University and Community College of Denver did not feel left out. So I've been trying to be as much in touch with them as possible and trying to think of who else needs to know this information about what's going on with us. And also creative advocacy. So, you know, many of us now, you know, don't have sort of that face-to-face time perhaps with our supervisors or with administration. And so not being shy about resending an email or bugging somebody because they're dealing with the same constraints that we are, and trying to also give more latitude. So if I don't get an answer on something right away, trying to be a little more understanding and saying, okay, well, clearly that person must be as busy as I am or dealing with the same kinds of issues. So kind of trying to figure out how to advocate for the things that are important for us and for our group, yet at the same time also being mindful of kind of the broader situation. So I've had to kind of get creative and nudge in some different ways and perhaps let go in some others as well. And as I mentioned, try to keep policies and practices as equitable as possible. Again, with the caveat that we understand not everything can be 100% equitable across the board. Again, depending on situations, positions, functions, workloads, those kinds of things, but trying to really think about, if I institute this process or this policy, how is this going to look across the board in as many ways as possible? And some information became available after we were all working remotely. So for example, again, how are people tracking a specific type of leave or something like that? And so we're adjusting as needed. And that again is sort of the reality of the situation. And then again, being asked to respond or make a decision with little or information or context available, sort of again, case by case decision, taking it day by day and just trying to, again, be transparent, be as open and communicative as possible, and being honest and upfront in every way I can. So that's sort of some of the things that I've learned and thought about along the way. I'm sure there will be many more, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but not before I share my slide with my email address on there. And if anybody has any follow-up questions that you want to discuss after the session, I'm happy to talk with you via email or in any other way. And hopefully this was helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Cinthya and Martin. And I encourage participants to continue to add some questions or comments to the chat. I've been tracking them as they come in, so I'll just sort of run down the list. So we had a question, we had a couple of question and comments kind of around hotspots. Someone asked, where did you acquire them? I also saw that Cinthya said she could share a list, but if you guys could talk maybe a little bit about your experience with hotspots.
Hey, it's Martin, so I had a hard time unmuting myself. But we leased some of them through AT&T. I know that a lot companies like Kajit and things like that, they use the Sprint backbone. I do know that some of the television providers like Spectrum are offering free internet right now during the COVID crisis. So if you look at your local service providers, there might be some opportunities there to get that. I also remember doing some research a while back on hotspots for low income folks. So if you have a patron who falls in the low income bracket, there is a, through the federal government, a service where they can get a hotspot for $10 a month. And I can mute myself and try to share, look for that and share that in chat if you'd like.
Yeah, same here. I put the names of the three organizations that we were familiar with: Mobile, Beacon, TechSoup, Digital Wish. I'm sure there's many others, and we have encouraged students alike that have asked questions, as well as our own folks and anybody to check out what they might be able to do in that regard. I think we had Mobile Beacon as our hotspot lending company for a while anyway. So luckily for us, this was not a brand new process that we had to start from scratch. And then the institutions as well also worked with students to get them, making sure that they had access to some of these hotspots and laptops and things like that as well. Because for our population, we are a very diverse campus. It's a commuter campus. And so a lot of our students, I think, had some challenges making sure that they had access to what they needed to be successful in their coursework. And we try to assist as much as we could with that as well.
That's it. Margot, I wonder if I'd like to say something to piggyback on something that Cynthia said. I know I mentioned in my presentation that we track kind of the work we do, but we do it very broadly. I do not encourage anyone to track how many hours they spend per day on something, and or tracking, you know, like a time and motion study sort of thing. It's too stressful. We're just trying to keep ourselves honest that we're doing some work, but no one is concerned about how productive you're being throughout the day and how many different things you work on. It's just kind of keeping a very, very broad running list. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks. Thank you both. I have another question that came in, and I think Cynthia had mentioned that she did have student workers on chat, but there was a question kind of in the beginning asking if there were student workers doing chat, or is it all staff?
Here at Central Piedmont, we're not allowed to use student workers right now. And that's mainly, I guess, because all of our student workers did come work in person, but student workers, the financial aid students, that sort of stuff, they were all told they couldn't work, which is unfortunate because some of the students really rely on those funds. So it's all staff, it's all paid staff that we have full and part-time.
Yeah, and for us, the students that are able to work remotely are definitely working remotely, whether it's, you know, again, providing chat or working on projects. And, but as I mentioned, we're making the commitment to make sure that everyone is paid regardless of how much remote work they can do. And I've seen a couple of questions about kind of time tracking and vacation time and things like that. And I just want to kind of clarify. So in terms of kind of taking regular leave, our folks are encouraged to take, like, if you need to take sick leave for any reason, go ahead. If you do still want to take some vacation time because you want to have that time to be able to do, you know, take care of whatever you need to take care of, that is definitely kind of the same. In terms of folks who are hourly, or I think for us that would be classified staff, everyone still fills out timesheets and does kind of what they would normally do. The difference is that they're not penalized if they're not able to work remotely. So hopefully, that clarifies it a little bit. And I am seeing some folks are saying that even like everyone, they still have to track their hours hourly, which, yeah, I would if at all possible, I would advocate to not do that because that does create a lot of stress. It's I think, unnecessary stress and anxiety for everyone. And I don't know, I don't have any specific tips. I can maybe think about it sort of offline, how you can hopefully make that case for your folks, but I would advocate definitely against that.
I agree with you, Cynthia. I think that tracking every single thing you do at work is a little beyond the pale. We are focused very much on mental health and trying to keep ourselves going as much as possible, because it's really hard. I mean, I have a 9-year-old at the house who has to do homework. I've got dogs. You know, it's you're at home, but you're also working as much as you can. And I would suggest anyone who's having to deal with that situation to go back to the manager or go back to the people in charge and just try to talk to them about, you know, if you're going to track the kind of work that people are doing, do it broadly. No one needs to know what I do every hour of the day. And we've even been told, the college knows that we're not going to be working 40 hours a week. It's just not going to happen. No one's going to work 40 hours from home. But we're doing as much as we can to be as productive as we can with one single focus. It's all about serving our students. So whatever we can, that's serve our students, that's what we're doing.
Great, thanks. There's a lot of comments and concern around this issue, so I appreciate you both speaking to that. Another question that came in is, have you found the multiple info streams, such as email, websites, chat, that can get overwhelming? How might we best handle that?
So I would say, and again, I think this really depends on kind of, you know, how you prefer to work with those different tools. I try to kind of set aside sort of dedicated time, like I'm going to start, you know, just doing my email and worry about that. Or if I'm in meetings a lot, which I tend to be, you know, I'm going to have my meeting block, and I try to schedule all my meetings as close to one another as I can, so I can just have that block of meetings. And then once I'm done with that, then I can kind of set that aside. So that's sort of how I try to do that. I'm not really good about turning off my email on a daily basis. So I always get pings, you know, and I'm always like, oh, I need to check my messages. And so I think it's kind of finding that balance. And then again, it's about also being able to say, you know, I'm going to take lunchtime. It's okay to have a break. It's okay for me to go get a drink of water or something, you know, and just sort of, again, not impose it on yourself like I have to be glued to the computer, and if I don't respond to an email within 5 minutes, that means I'm not working. And so I think it's just kind of finding that rhythm. And, you know, as Martin mentioned, right, if you have other things going on in the household or in your family or, you know, situation, kind of allowing for that balance. And I think it is a balance. I don't know if Martin has anything else he wants to add. Those are kind of not great ideas, but.
Yeah, I agree. We're doing similar things. At the first week, I really thought that I had to be on every minute of the day. I had to constantly check what I'm doing. And I had to realize that, no, I just need to keep up as much as I can, but I don't have to be sitting in front of the computer 8-10 hours a day. And the first couple of days, I must have been on the computer 12 hours each day, working late to try to get things organized. But we definitely don't expect our staff to be sitting in front of the computers all day long, because I don't know about anybody else, but my back and my legs started hurting me because I'm not in the chair as much as I am right now. There was something else I was going to say, and I lost my train of thought. Let me get back to it.
Another question that came in was asking, what are some ways that the balance can be adjusted or accounted for when some are working more than others?
You know, Cynthia kind of talked about this a little bit. I don't think you're going to get full equity in a situation like that, because we have people who are super tech savvy and we have people who have a hard time using a laptop or have a really hard time using a Chromebook. So I think you have to work with everybody to do so that they can do the best they can. But I think going into it with the assumption that people are just going to try their best and working with them is probably all you can do. I understand the frustration of, you know, I'm working hard, I'm doing all this, but maybe I see somebody who's not online a lot, who's not responding to emails. I don't have a good answer to that other than, you know, giving people some grace and some space.
And one of the things some of our folks have done is If they haven't been able to work remotely as much as perhaps anticipated, they've been looking at things like professional development, or some of our folks are talking about having like a book club on a related topic. So keeping busy and still working on some of these things, which are equally important. You know, again, professional development, some of these things kind of don't go away in this environment. And so maybe paying more attention to some of those things. And that can also serve as a team building and a morale boost. I know there were some questions about how do you keep morale kind of as positive as you can, other than checking in. And I think it's through some of these ways. Is there any kind of regular get-togethers? Again, we were thinking of having like a Zoom background contest, who's got the funnest Zoom background kind of thing, you know. So just some of these things, and sharing about kind of what's going on in our lives, and seeing everyone's, you know, work environments, and like I said, pets and family members and things kind of helps, I think, keep some of that morale hopefully a little bit positive.
You know, that reminds me of something we do every morning. Since we have an all staff chat, people always start their morning by saying good morning to everybody. And then some people will share silly pictures. One of our staff members just had a baby, so we shared the pictures there. And that's kind of helping us a little more outside of just working with each other. And I think that's really helping. I had a meeting with my campus managers on Monday. I don't think we discussed really anything about work. It was all just talking about what it's like to be stuck at home and kind of kvetching with each other and kind of venting about our frustrations. And that really helped. I think we were on the phone for almost an hour, and we talked about nothing, but it was good.
Thanks. Sort of another sort of related question that came in privately. Someone commented, I'm curious about how you find the balance between information sharing and compassion, particularly library-wide meetings. Our dean has been holding daily hour-long update meetings. They usually go long, and she calls on staff to share their video, and generally demands engagement and positivity. It's exhausting for staff and doesn't create an environment of trust or care. Morale, which was already low, has crashed. The energy demands, especially considering the circumstances, are just so far from reality.
Wow, that's a great question. And I think I'm going to sound like a broken record. I think, again, it depends on sort of your environment and kind of what your situation is. I know for me personally, I've been almost feeling guilty, like I'm not sharing enough. And so I've tried to think of, well, what can I say, you know, to reassure people as much as I can. And so we definitely don't have like weekly meetings and things like that. And some folks are turning their videos on, some folks are choosing not to. We haven't really had to have, I guess, that conversation, or we didn't go into as much detail about sort of the expectations. We've kept it pretty, I guess, for lack of a better word, pretty loose in that regard. But as I mentioned in the slides, I've tried to share as much as I could as soon as I had relevant information. I rely a lot on the admin team to help me disseminate the messaging. But then when I felt like it's been important for me to say, as the director, this is what's going on, here are the priorities, I've done that, of course. And I did a lot more of that as things were kind of ramping up and the decisions were being made very quickly about, okay, we're going to remote, now we have to think about this. And there was a lot of, here's what's going on right now, here's what I found out about today. And then as we've transitioned to remote, we've kind of slowed down the pace a little bit. And now I am in, of course, constant contact with our admin team and with our HR folks and my own boss and things like that. And I'm trying to sort of still find a good balance of like, how often do I give updates, even if I don't have an update? I think sometimes even that is important to just say. Again, I'm not a huge fan of just having a meeting just to say, oh, well, here's our weekly update, and then everybody's kind of looking at each other. So I think, again, it really depends on the organizational kind of structure and culture and how things did work. And again, I am not trying to replicate what we had when we were all in the library in a virtual environment. That is not what I'm trying to do, because I don't think it's sustainable or realistic. But that's just my kind of, personal approach.
Cinthya, I think we're similar in that, like when we have our once weekly check-in meetings. It's not so much, it's not agenda driven at all. It's all just, how's everybody doing? The dean is here, the director's here. Does anybody have a question for us that we didn't maybe communicate well enough or weren't clear enough about a weekly update? Other than that, those meetings are driven by the staff. They're driven by what staff want to talk about. And if the meeting only lasts 10, 15 minutes, that's fine. That's actually not a problem. Somebody mentioned something about video being on. Just to throw it out there, half the time I can't even use video anymore because my internet connection is so slow. So, you know, I guess you could blame it on something like that, saying it's not going to connect. But yeah, that's been an issue for us with the video, that most people can't even do it. I hope that helps.
Thank you both for that. Another question is, how do you anticipate accepting returning items to the library when able? For example, would you accept items being sent back through the mail? And what about fines?
Good question. We were just talking about that today. And I know, Cinthya, you mentioned in your presentation a little bit. Right now, we don't even know when we're going to be back on campus. So the thought is now, if we go back to campus sometime mid-May, which is when our semester is over, we will start sending out notifications and get equipment back. If not, we're just going to kind of play it by ear and not request anything to come back until we are physically there. Everything's locked up, everything's closed. I don't want anyone dropping any kind of equipment off without someone being there. So that's kind of how it is. I remember talking with the head of ITS recently, and he said, you know what, some things are going to get lost, and maybe that's not the worst thing that could happen. So that's where we are.
Yeah, same here. We suspended all fines for everyone. It's in that link that I shared on our kind of updated website. Nobody's going to get penalized. We know some things might not come back, and that's fine too. And once we do reopen, we will kind of figure out how to get those items back and get returns going again. We physically closed off, I think, at least one of our book drops because we didn't want it to just pile up and eventually become clogged and things like that. I think one might still be available, but we are definitely not kind of worrying about that. And yeah, and especially with what, you know, students are going through and everyone else, we're just not worrying about it at the moment, and we'll figure it out when we come back.
Someone just posted that they're doing bulk renewals. We're doing something similar. Our ILS can't do bulk renewals, but we're having someone go through and track all checkouts and every day renew them if they're coming up. But we're extending everything until the end of the semester, and then we'll keep extending it. But we did have to go in and manually adjust several hundred due dates, but that's what we did.
Another question, as time develops toward a period where staff members would have normally taken summer vacation, such as May and June, how have you handled taking vacation versus banking against unforeseen time away needs? In other words, do you encourage staff to take that regular vacation week, or do you encourage them to bank it in case taking care of someone later is required?
I think for us, again, it's been more of a individual situation. And I think I mentioned this previously. If, you know, folks like I myself have taken a few hours of vacation because I just wanted to make sure that I had that time to get some things done. And I went ahead and did that. So I think we're keeping things very, very flexible, and our campus HR is working on things like leave policies and things like that, I think related to COVID. So I feel like we're pretty well covered. You know, I haven't seen any requests, as far as I know, kind of come through for sort of a week-long vacation, but if that were what was needed, we would definitely approve that. Obviously, I don't think a whole lot of folks are going to be traveling anytime soon, so I don't know how that or might not affect their plans, but for the most part, I think folks are taking the leave that they need to do what they need to do. So but we haven't really asked specifically in that, you know, we haven't told people don't take it so you can have it for later kind of thing. And that's actually a good point. I hadn't really thought about it quite that way.
Yeah, we really hadn't thought about it that way either, but we're doing what Cinthya is saying. Our HR is still developing policies around right now. What do you do if someone in your home gets sick, and if you get sick, do you take sick time? Is that just, how do we do that? How do we code that? We don't have any guidance on that, but we're kind of erring on giving people the space they need to be healthy. And if no real requests have come through for the summer yet, but if someone needs to take a summer vacation, have at it. If they have a sick time, we'll work with them as best we can. Everything is so unknowable right now. Everything is so up in the air. It seems hard to make that decision in April.
Thanks. I see we're already at the top of the hour, and I think there were a few more questions. I'll read out one more, and then we'll probably have to wrap, but feel free to keep using the chat area to share comments. There was a question, Cinthya, I think you mentioned that your librarians are conducting library instructions online. If so, can you please elaborate?
Yeah, so we were kind of coming, I think, towards the tail end of our instruction season. And so we didn't have, I think, too many classes kind of, to deal with. But the ones that we did, as far as I know, and I'm not quite as closely involved with our instruction program, but we carried them on through Zoom, and they were successful. I mean, we've got, Zoom allows for screen sharing and all those capabilities. So I think they went off really, really well. We also have our email and our chat available for students who do have follow-up questions, and folks have been kind of continuing on. And we've already, and I mean, I think this is true for a lot of different libraries in higher ed in general. The move to online learning has, it's kind of precipitated everyone sort of thinking more about that environment anyway. And so luckily, I think libraries are very well positioned to provide services remotely, and so, or hopefully, and so I kind of feel like for us, it was not a huge, sort of a huge lift in that regard. And, but we're gonna definitely have to think about, if we're kind of staying in this remote environment for an extended period of time, would that change kind of how our approach and all of that good stuff. But we have a very robust instruction program. And so I'm just very thankful that we have the ability to continue to support our students in that way.
The tag on to what Cinthya said, we were actually talking today about, since we've realized that there are some benefits to some of the things we're learning now about how to do some of this instruction online, these one-on-one sessions online. What do we need to do once this crisis is over? Are there things we need to keep doing or think about to keep doing that are working really well for our students? So we're kind of looking at it from that approach. So if someone does need a virtual one-on-one, we now know how to do that, and I think there's also some real gains, I think, that we're making as libraries, because we are always at the cutting edge of this stuff, of this technology, and we're really well positioned, I think, to help our students in the best way possible online.
That's such a great point, Martin. I think we're all learning how to do things differently, and some of the things that we're learning are really wonderful and things that we'll want to retain. So I think we got through most of the questions. If there are any urgent or pressing questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll begin wrapping up. I do see a question about the recording. We should hopefully be able to email it out within the next day or so. We'll also post it online. And Cinthya and Martin, if you have any final words of wisdom to share, please feel free.
I would just say to everyone, just hang in there. As Elois said at the beginning of the session, I think, again, our health and well-being is the most important thing, and anything we can do, at least that I can do, to help answer questions or help support you in any way, I'm happy to do so. And I think that's all. I think we just have to just help each other out as much as we can.
I would reiterate what Cinthya said. I put my email address in chat. I forgot to put it in my presentation. I'm so sorry about that. And I will be grateful to be a resource for anyone. I hope it goes vice versa. And yeah, we'll get through this, and I think we'll find some really amazing new ways to use these online tools that we never would have thought about until all this happened. So while I can't wait for this to be over, I think it's been a great learning experience for us.
And Martin and Cynthia, thank you again for facilitating this wonderful conversation today. We really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who joined us this afternoon. We will share the recording as well as the chat transcript and slides shortly. So please watch your email for that. And thanks again for joining us today.